This treaty convention hopefully will close the door to the chapters of abuse and mistreatment. At least that's our intentions. It may develop where it will be necessary that the arms that we laid down at Wounded Knee will have to be picked up again and again.
The American Indian movement, founded in 1968 by Dennis Banks and Russell Means, were one of the many groups a part of the civil rights movement. The movement not only inspired triumphs in the protection of Native American land, yet also tragedies of heavy discrimination based on fear and unacknowledged stereotypes, eventually leading to more triumphs in the reevaluation between the relationship of the Anglo and Indigenous peoples. Located in the northwest corner of New Mexico resides the town of Farmington. Established in 1901, Farmington is home to several diverse cultures and is also known as a border town. A border town is a particular boundary line which consists of two regions that are completely different in terms of race, religious practice, or moral standards. The two opposing cultures were the Navajo Nation and the Anglo people of Farmington. About over 40 years ago, the town of Farmington was struck with tragedy. April of 1974, 3 Navajo men had been found dead and scattered across an area known as Chokecherry Canyon in Farmington, New Mexico. On a Sunday of 1974, a family went to have a picnic lunch at the canyon, however, quickly found the body of a dead Indian. The face of the Indian was puffy and mashed in. The rocks injured around him, scattered with his own blood, burned all over his body and his private parts severed. Not too long after, another body had been found, covered by Lieutenant R.B. Miller of the Farmington Police Department. This body suffered just as much pain. Huge stones to the head, melted plastic all over his backside, and burnt too. Another body was found, same marks, same death. The names of the victims: Herman Benally, John Harvey, and David Ignacio.
The murders happened on a Friday night, and on the Monday after this, the students were bringing fingers of the individuals that were, the individual Navajos that were killed. They cut their fingers off, and they were bringing the fingers to school.
Based on this particular overheard conversation, the police were able to locate the killers, who were 3 teens who attended Farmington High School. The boys' names were Peter Burke, Orrin Thacker, and Cody Vernon Crawford, 2 16-year-olds and 1 15-year-old, all admitting to lighting the men on fire, burning plastic on them, and exploding fireworks on the bodies of the Indian men who were too intoxicated and outnumbered to fight back. The incident, a part of a town practice called Indian rolling. On June 7, 1974, Aztec District Court's Judge Frank B. Zinn was to determine the outcome of the white youths who murdered the men. The 3 teenagers were then sentenced to only attend the New Mexico Boys' School at Springer, not exceeding their 21st birthday. Due to a New Mexico law, the juveniles cannot be tried as adults unless the court finds that there is no chance to rehabilitate them. Immediately, there was a heavy response from the Native American community. Even before the trials, many people a part of the Navajo Nation, inspired by AIM, peacefully marched every weekend. On May 4, 1974, about 3,000 American Indians paid tribute to the Navajo victims in a memorial parade.
I had a friend that lived up Sunset, and I remember her coming to school and saying she would notice truckloads of Native Americans going up the street.
Not only did it serve to remember the lost lives, but highlight the covered racism and discrimination in Farmington. In hopes to bring about another protest, the Coalition for Navajo Liberation and members of the American Indian Movement were denied a request to a parade permit for Saturday, June 8, 1974, as it was already taken by the sheriff's posse for its annual rodeo parade. The leaders saw mimicked rituals of the Old West, characterizing officers in outfits similar to cavalry uniforms of historical Native American oppressors. The leaders were insulted by the insensitivity and attempted to block any progress of the parade. It began to erupt in a tragic outbreak.
I just remember AIM when AIM came in. I was actually on the side street there. It was Dunlap's at the time. But I remember that the tear gas came out and we turned and ran, so we didn't get affected by it.
The police threw tear gas into the crowds and arrested anyone they could at the event, totaling 35 arrests and various injured bystanders.
There was riots that happened in Farmington in the 1970s. The American Indian movement came to Farmington, and there were burning and flipping over cars in downtown Farmington, and because the individuals that were responsible for killing the natives, they just got away with it.
I stumbled upon this parade that was going on, ended up being arrested, and it was while in jail learning about the history there. And I felt that it was important. It was an important story. It was a chapter in Anglo-Indian relations that really should be preserved.
The tragic display didn't stop here. Many Native Americans continued to march as the story became a nationwide triumph-inducing situation for members of the American Indian movement. They would not stop unless these lost lives could change how society perceives its indigenous peoples.
And our fight for our rights will continue. And those Navajo and Zuni people that have been killed in the past month, in the past week, down in Farmington, New Mexico, and Albuquerque, New Mexico.
An advisory committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights visited Farmington due to the aftermath of the killings. They held hearings and conducted independent investigations of the relationship of the Anglo and the Navajo people. A committee had filed a report to the commission, which ended in July of 1975. It was called the Farmington Report, A Conflict of Cultures. The hearings are made up of over 100 leaders within the county, many to which included the Coalition for Navajo Liberation and members of AIM. Meetings located at the Indian Center in Farmington didn't only address the murders, but also the causes within Farmington that led to such a tragic event. As Coalition leader John Redhouse, a graduate of Farmington High School, describes these murders as a result of continued racism and neglect. We didn't see these murders as the act of 3 crazy kids. We saw it as part of a whole racist picture. For years, it has been almost a sport, a sort of sick, perverted tradition among Anglo youth of Farmington High School. Many groups, including the Coalition and AIM, tried several attempts to involve the town of Farmington to reestablish prejudice. Chairman of the Salmon and Human Rights Committee, Jim Fassett, released a statement after the mayor's decision to disband the Navajo Relations Committee. I wonder if the people of Farmington are aware of the fact that their city is now included in a very select groups of municipalities which has attempted and failed to subvert to the rights of citizens. Perhaps one day the name Farmington will rank up there with Selma and Birmingham. After the 3 days, the town came to a census that Farmington must now enter a new era of race relations and cultural pluralism.
If we do not act now to deal with the problems of the next generation, this nation will be in deep trouble.
30 years later, the United States Commission on Civil Rights did come back to visit Farmington to view any changes made. From the report, A Conflict of Cultures, the Commission saw minimal civic and business leaders promoting the relationships between diverse groups. The Commission found that by new leadership and establishments, Farmington has decreased the status of the ethnic gap since 1974. They created an institution known as the Totowa Behavioral Health Authority to address alcohol abuse, operating as an independent health delivery service with 6 other partnering agencies, as well as the Farmington Intertribal Indian Organization, which aims at providing service to Native American people. Farmington has also established homeless shelters to keep others from dying on the street due to exposure. The New Mexico Advisory and other San Juan County organizations are now beginning to urge the involvement of Native Americans for both employment and policy-making roles, triumphantly reestablishing a tragic past. Throughout the history of race relations, we've seen a never-ending wave of triumphs and tragedies. For the Native American people, the biggest triumph is in their ability to rise and fight, as they were granted so for such a long time. Tragedy after tragedy, the day of their final triumph will come.
And the streets overflowing today with people who wanted to say goodbye to Ashlyn Mike, the 11-year-old girl who was kidnapped off the street and murdered.
A group of young men are accused of luring a mentally challenged Native American into an apartment and branding him with swastikas.
Equality and justice for all. May your God forgive you. The treatment of our people has been a national tragedy and disgrace. The time has come to put an end to that disgrace. Alcatraz